Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's special event. My name is Alla Drigola, and I am the Director of Parliamentary Affairs and SME Policy at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and I'm very excited to be moderating today's panel discussion. Today's event is the first in a new series hosted by the Canadian Chamber in 2021, entitled The Fourth Industrial Revolution. This 9-part series will explore the technological revolution that is fundamentally shifting the way we live, work, and relate to one another. The exponential speed of the current breakthroughs is being accelerated by the shift to a virtual world as a result of COVID-19. Our discussions will explore how these changes are disrupting almost every industry and what Canada must do to be at the forefront of these innovations. I am very excited to be launching this new series with a discussion on e-commerce and how it evolved in 2020 and what to expect in 2021 and beyond. We have often heard 2020 described as unprecedented, but this description usually comes in the form of new challenges, trials, and tribulations. But 2020 also brought unprecedented growth and adoption of e-commerce, as businesses and consumers alike had to adapt how they interact in a new socially distanced world. Canadians increasingly turn to e-commerce for everything from essential cleaning supplies to holiday gifts to groceries and even a snack from your favorite neighborhood pub. Layered on top of the pandemic was a rise in the support for businesses owned by BIPOC Canadians, and e-commerce platforms responded accordingly. We know that 2020 may have changed e-commerce forever, but questions remain about trends and which are here to stay and what new innovations we are expecting in 2021 and beyond. To discuss these issues and more, we have a very special panel of expert speakers here with us today. But before we begin, I just want to go over a few quick housekeeping items. First, you will notice that your lines are muted, and they will continue to be muted during today's session to ensure that everyone will be able to hear our presenters clearly. Second, we have reserved some time at the end of the session for our panelists to answer your questions. We will be using Slido, and if you've been to any of the Canadian Chamber's virtual events during the pandemic, you should be familiar with Slido. But if this is your first time joining us, just open up your web browser, type sli.do into the website bar, and this will take you to the Slido webpage. This event's participant code is IR4128. Please submit your questions there, and we will get to them at the end of the webinar. So before we begin, I would like to introduce our 3 panelists. First, we have Hisham Fahmy, Vice President and GM of Loblaw Marketplace from Loblaw Digital. We have Leanne Gibson, who is Head of Industry at Facebook and Instagram Canada. And we have Carissa Mara, who's a business expert with Square Canada. I want to open up today's discussion by giving each of our panelists an opportunity to make some brief opening remarks. Hisham, let's start with you.
Thank you, Alla. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the invite. My name is Hisham Fahmy. I lead all the omni-channel development at Loblaws. We call our group Loblaws Digital. And maybe just a quick background on Loblaw. Probably most of you know it, being Canada, but we're one of Canada's leading grocery and pharmacy retailer, and we're actually Canada's largest private sector employer. And our purpose has always been to help Canadians live life well, and we strive to do that by making it easier for Canadians to achieve their nutritional and health and wellness needs. We've got over 2,400 locations between grocery and pharmacies. And PC Optum is our beloved loyalty program, one of Canada's largest loyalty programs, and we've got 18 million members in it. And we started our online sort of e-commerce journey back in 2014, and our first foray was getting Joe Fresh apparel online. And since there we've expanded quite far, and so now we have our Joe Fresh, we have the PC Express the online grocery. We have our Shoppers Drug Mart, and that encompasses both the online pharmacy as well as online beauty and the front of store as well. And then recently we launched our third-party marketplace. And then in all those offerings, so our Shoppers offerings and our online grocery offerings, we allow for both in-store pickup and delivery at home. And we also do pick up at transit locations and lockers at transit locations. So it's been a great journey over the last 6 years, and happy to share some of the insights with the group here today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Leanne, let's go to you next.
Great. Thank you, Alla. It's wonderful to be here. So I am Leanne Gibson, and in my role at Facebook, I'm fortunate to work with leading brands across many industries, as well as our much loved small businesses across the country. And at Facebook, our mission is to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. And this ties directly to the work we've been continuing to do to support small businesses, specifically in the last 12 months since the pandemic, as well as some of the work we do in our larger community, including efforts around supporting well-being for Canadians. And this is where I personally get my energy and my passion, along with supporting the growth and development of my team at Facebook. But before digging into today's conversation, I just want to pause and talk a little bit about how impressed I am and really blown away by the resilience of Canadian businesses in the last 12 months, as well as the speed and acceleration of e-commerce. I'm also very impressed with the goodwill and the support that's come from local communities, corporations, and government bodies. One of the silver linings of this pandemic is the way we've seen the best of humanity in many ways with the pouring out of support for businesses. 2020, and Alla touched on this, showed us how quickly the world can change. In just a few months, the pandemic transformed the way we live, the way we work, the way we shop and connect with each other. And with the continued focus on public health and lockdown restrictions, I do think we're going to be in this for some time. We know at Facebook that over half of consumers say that they spend more online now compared to earlier in 2020. The data also suggests that those trends will not reverse when stores reopen. In fact, 70% of Canadian consumers say they will continue to buy the same amount online, if not more. And just a stat for you, while Canadians are very highly digitally penetrated, and we have been for years, as of last spring 2020, only 40% of Canadian businesses had an e-commerce website. So if you pause on that for a moment, that's quite something if we think about where we are now. And you know, we've said it many times, as had others in the market, we have seen 10 years of digital transformation take place in just a few months. So I would say that without question, e-commerce is no longer a nice to have, it's actually necessary for survival for businesses. So from what I've seen at Facebook and the work we've done, the businesses that are not just recovering in the pandemic, but that are thriving are the ones that are leading with a digital first approach. So I believe that there's lots of support for small businesses in many ways around our community. And at Facebook, we're doing what we can to support businesses, not just pivot in a pandemic, but thrive. And I'm really grateful to be here and looking forward to the conversation we're going to have. So thank you, Alla.
Thanks so much. And Carissa, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us here. And Leanne, I can't agree with you more on the impact that this has had in you know, that silver lining of this last year. So I lead a team over here at Square, where we help business owners of all types and sizes across Canada. Square has been in Canada for 8 years, and we're likely known best for that little white reader that everyone knows. That's sort of the heart blood of our whole business. But what we're really excited about is that we have this entire toolkit that includes online selling that helps business owners with their operations. One thing that is glaringly obvious to us at Square is that running a business has always been a hard thing to do, but the last 12 months has been incredibly challenging. One of the reasons we've noticed that it's been so difficult is because business owners have had to make so many changes to their business and almost overnight. That's certainly true as business owners have rapidly adopted digital tools to do things like moving online. Selling online has been on a lot of business owners' to-do lists, but it suddenly became critical with the restrictions in place. We've also seen business owners that are wanting greater control over their operations, whether they're a quick service restaurant, a cafe, a salon, or a makeup retailer. And in one area we're seeing that most specifically is with delivery and pickup. Prior to COVID, restaurants would primarily outsource delivery and pickup. Rarely would they be in control of the pickup or even local delivery. They now have access to tools that make it easier for them to manage these crucial aspects of their business. I'm excited to be here today to discuss the evolution of e-commerce over the last year, because it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all. We're helping across all types of businesses to help them to adapt and sell online. Everyone's at a completely different stage. Back in March, maybe these businesses had to rush online to survive. Maybe they were already online, but now they've had to change and evolve to add more muscle behind the business that they've built. or we're seeing some businesses that aren't online at all. And that's completely okay, because it's never too late for them to reinvent their business. So super thrilled to be here to talk about that today.
Thank you so much to all three of you for your opening comments. And Krista, I'm going to start with you because I think that you touched on a couple of things that, for me, I find really fascinating. And as you alluded to in your opening comments, I mean, Square was really well known for that little white box, and your client, perception. The perception is your client base is primarily those in-person transactions. Can you speak to how Square responded to all of your customers and clients who were suddenly not allowed to conduct business in person? And you mentioned that toolkit. Were you already set up with that, or did you have to scale up quickly? And what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, great question. So for us, it's always been very challenging, like any business, where people always think of us as they think of our strength, which is this in-person payment solution. But we actually have been building this broader toolkit for our sellers over a long period of time. Back in 2018, we actually acquired Weebly, which allowed and empowered our sellers to start selling online. Of course, though, back in March, we had to take a step back and think, okay, how can we help our sellers? How can we evolve what we have to empower them to continue to sell? So we paused, we changed our roadmaps, and that's where we were able to release some new functionality that allowed our business owners to adapt as well. So with that, we launched our order ahead for curbside pickup and local delivery. We also launched a portal for e-gift cards, so our service-based businesses as well as our retailers could sell gift cards so they could continue getting that cash flow happening when their doors weren't open. So we just took a lot of time to be consultants and really understand the businesses that we were working with. We listened to their needs, we took the time to understand their struggles, and then with that, we could really deeply understand how we could help them continue to run their businesses.
Yeah, and I think that, as Leanne mentioned in her comments, that there's a lot of consumers reporting that they will like to keep or increase their level of online shopping, and data shows that the vast majority of Canadians are really happy with their e-commerce experience. And in your, as you tell that story about how you had to shift and provide all these new services, do you anticipate that this level of e-commerce activity that we're seeing right now will hold steady, or will some of that demand shift back to that traditional in-person shopping experience?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for myself and what we hear from our customers. I love shopping from home. It's easier. We know at this time, it's safer. And we've always known our customers are they know what they want. They spend the time researching at home. They have access to do that. And we've just launched all of these new amazing tools, and I've seen businesses adapt to support that type of purchasing. So I imagine that we would continue on. Of course, some people will want to go back to their local stores in person when that's allowed, but I can't see that people will stop purchasing the way they are because they have all this access at their fingertips.
Yeah, Hisham, I think that segues really nicely into Loblaws, because I think, while there's a whole slew of offerings that your corporate umbrella has, but that the grocery sector is one of those where people still traditionally want that in-person experience. I mean, you want to go to the grocery store and select the perfectly ripe avocado, or that nice cut of meat. And you mentioned in your opening comments that you've been expanding into the e-commerce market since 2014. Can you talk about why Loblaws saw that e-commerce was a future of not just your other departments, but specifically the grocery business?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, way back several years ago when we kind of embarked on this journey, I think we saw two important trends, right? I think the first one, and I think Leanne referred to it, is the Canadians were getting more and more digitally engaged, right? And we're becoming kind of digital natives. And so, it became very clear to us that the bar that we set in terms of customer experience and what customers expect needs to be centered around digital, right? Because that's where people's mindsets were. And almost what we had to, that bar was not other retailers, but other digital experiences that people are doing, whether they apps on their phones and everything. And we had to have a bit of that mindset, right, in terms of what we were delivering. So that was one trend we saw. The other trend is, we're just getting busier and busier in our lives, right? And it changes day to day, even through the week, right? And so, I think a lot of us can relate to, we juggle between, activities for our families and our kids and stuff. And so on some of those busy days, all we need to do is just get in and out and just get, our groceries and needs. And so there it's convenience and just how do I get easier? And then there's other days where we're planning on a big, nice dinner with our family or inviting guests over, in which case then you do want to browse the aisles and kind of, get some inspiration. And so it was really about how do we offer all the modes of convenience, because it's not one size fits all, and it's not even one size fits all for a single person. As a person, I will probably migrate, through different needs throughout the week. And so then we just thought about how do we offer different kinds of convenience. So you can always have the in-store experience, and that's always available to you there, but then you can still have, picking up groceries and have it there on your commute, and you get it off, your commute train on your way home, or picking it up on your way back from work from a store, or having it delivered at home. And that was kind of what drove the vision. And I think, COVID just then, and the pandemic just reinforced that, all of a sudden there was a big shift. And actually one of the most convenient ways happened to be then just picking up, from doing, sort of click and collect pickup or delivery at home. And it's just that, we were there and you actually had an offering for whatever the need was at the time.
Absolutely. And so with that kind of foundation laid, how did COVID change what you were already planning to do or what you were already doing? I mean, did you have to scale up certain parts of the back end business or deliver any new offerings?
Really, I mean, the challenge became, we talk about this a lot, right? And we were in a really good position because we entered 2020 and we had, 700 locations where customers could pick up, the groceries. We were offering delivery to about 2/3 of the Canadian population. So we had really good coverage there in terms of an offering. And our stores knew best how to service the customers, right? And service their needs. But what we didn't anticipate is that huge spike in demand. And so then it really just became a challenge. How do we absorb that spike? And I recall even just personally, if you look at just from an infrastructure and technology, like that, March 12th, when the first lockdown was ever kind of announced, between March 12th and 14th, seeing the load on our systems go, 10, 20, 30x, just in 72 hours, well, it was quite, mind-boggling to see, right? And so a lot of our, priorities sort of shifted, and we pivoted and just like, how do we absorb it and how do we scale? And it was both on, our e-commerce offerings and our sort of infrastructure and technology. And there was just an acceleration of a lot of roadmaps we had, but essentially what we were trying to do over 3 years, we were doing over the course of, several weeks. And then it was also on the fulfillment side was a big part, right? And so we had to invest in a lot of people. We had to hire a lot of colleagues that could do the picking of these goods. We kind of introduced, Canada's first automated fulfillment, centers and sort of the micro fulfillment centers. And so those, again, were all on our roadmap, but it was just a very fast acceleration of it so that we could actually accommodate, this demand. And then it was continuous optimization, sort of our algorithms and logic, just to sort of keep that, absorbing that demand and keeping that customer experience still top of mind and making, easy to use and customers get what they want when they want.
Perfect. In terms of demand, Leanne, and you spoke to this a little bit about in your opening comments, especially when it comes to the goodwill of the community. Facebook and Instagram have been long, social media powerhouses where many businesses were already promoting and selling their products and services. But beyond the pandemic, 2020, we saw a shift in the consumer behavior as a result of societal movements, including, a focus on shopping local and supporting your local businesses. And of course, the Black Lives Matter movement that saw a big spike in a desire to support, businesses owned by BIPOC Canadians. How did Facebook and Instagram respond to this, societal impacts and societal shifts for your local businesses or businesses that were already on Facebook and Instagram?
Sure. No, there's a lot we did. And listen, it's so important to support our businesses. I mean, our small, medium businesses make up the backbone of our economy. And I'm certainly proud of the work that we did and how we responded. Just a couple of examples. We had a grants program for small, medium businesses. Facebook globally announced $100 million in grants for up to 30,000 small businesses across 30 countries. In Canada, we announced nearly $3.5 million in grants, and that was made available to about 650 small businesses. We also partnered with Digital Main Street's program Shop Here. Facebook partnered to provide services that help businesses achieve digital transformation And we made a $1 million investment into Shop Here that was powered by Google. Again, this is an initiative to help 50,000 businesses build and optimize their stores online. We also had a partnership with Canada United, where we partnered just to really, this was a movement to show local businesses in Canada some love. This was last August, and it was really a call out to, go out and support local businesses and restaurants over the course of a weekend. But it's also extremely important to point out that we know, and you touched on this, Alla, COVID has disproportionately impacted business owners in the BIPOC community and really shed light on the systemic barriers that they face when starting, growing, and scaling their businesses. So we announced a $500,000 contribution in terms of funding the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Businesses in Canada. And equally important, we provided training to assist these businesses to rapidly pivot to the digital economy. In addition to that, we provided a training series last summer. We ran free virtual training series in partnership with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and the Canadian Business Resilience Network. We had something we call Boost with Facebook. Again, this is about supporting millions of people, getting them the digital skills and information they need to navigate challenging times and get back on track, with free on-demand online training. So those are some of the ways that we leaned in and supported and continue to support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's a lot of members of local chambers of commerce on the listening in today, and I think that those kinds of initiatives, I know we had a lot of feedback from folks that they were really helpful and really important. So thank you for that. In terms of in your conversations with these businesses, as you help them pivot and survive through the pandemic, do you see trends? Any kind of unique trends that stood out to you, or did you adapt any of your own offerings or services to businesses to meet these new and different needs that they have now during the pandemic, when they're primarily operating online versus when they were either a hybrid of online and in person or only in person?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I'm going to speak to trends first that we see, and then I'll touch on some of the product areas that we've pivoted on to respond. But in terms of trends, we know we're seeing, an urgent need to accelerate the pace of e-commerce adoption, not just in Canada, but around the world. But we have also seen consumer trends, and we're sharing a lot of these consumer trends with our partners. And really, it's consumer expectations have accelerated exponentially as well. And this trend is really driven, we break it down into 4 different themes we're seeing, and I'll touch on them quickly. The first one is we call it discovery. How people discover products has changed. Rather than going to a physical store, people and brands are sharing and discovering products all day, every day on a lot of our social platforms and other social platforms. That looks like a brand sharing an item that fulfills a need you have, or a friend messaging you a product that they think you would like. And so if we think, of e-commerce, sometimes we think of it essential. I'm going to buy this. I know what I need. This is more, think of window shopping and not even anticipating what you might want. So we're seeing a lot of that, and our partners need to respond to that differently. There's also immediacy. People's expectations around convenience have changed. And I think this applies to all of us, whether we realize it or not. In many ways, it's never been easier to buy something. Anything can be purchased anytime with the click of a button. It can arrive on your door, sometimes in hours. And because people have come to expect this easy, quick experience, they will leave if they don't get it. And so we talk about cart abandonment, and it accounts for at least 50% of attrition from the purchase funnel. And so it's costing e-marketers about $2 to $4 trillion a year. That is an enormous number. But if we all think of ourselves as the consumer, if you've had that experience where, oh, they're not accepting my postal code, or, oh, it's not populating my credit card, I don't have it with me right now, we will abandon an experience. So the need for frictionless experience is key, and we spend a lot of time talking to our partners about that. The next is personalization. And we can thank Netflix and Spotify, who have gone next level to create a new expectation for one-to-one personalization. Netflix personalization engine is so good that almost 80% of the shows and movies viewed on the platform are based on their recommendations, not what we sit down and think we want to watch. But it's not just Netflix lovers that appreciate the personalized touch. 91% of consumers say they are more likely to shop with a company and a brand that provide offers and recommendations that are relevant to them. So again, something we spend a lot of time educating our advertisers and partners on. And then the last is safety and security. And when people shop online, they want to know their payment information is being kept safe. And there's a number, 65%, this is a global number, of online shoppers express extreme concern about data privacy. And some say they are willing to pay more for a product if there are higher assurance around quality and safety. So this is really the consumer lens, but there are very important things to think about as you're building your online presence. And then I'll just touch on quickly from a product perspective. People already buy and sell on Facebook and Instagram, so it's natural for them to turn to our platforms to help them, with the shift to e-commerce. And last year we announced a new way for a business, any business, large or small, to set up a virtual storefront, and we call it Facebook Shops. And the idea is that any seller, like I said, whether it's a major global brand or a local, small local shop, you can create a customizable virtual store where you can browse products that will be curated based on your personal tastes. You can use Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, which is in the Facebook family of apps, which if you already use on a regular basis, it's a way to interact with a store associate for advice or information. You can click on whatever you want to buy, pay for it without having to enter new details every time, and that speaks to that frictionless experience. And so why is this important? It's because people's online experiences have been about historically bouncing between websites and pages and applications. We think that shopping online should be more like shopping in a physical store. And if we can make this happen, again, you're removing the friction and creating a really good experience for consumers. So that's probably the biggest product where we pivoted and accelerated quickly to make that available.
I think that there was a lot there that I think are super relevant for businesses who are operating online, and it's some of the challenges that they are facing. Chris and Leanne, maybe we'll start with Carissa, especially because Square had that really large customer base of in-person stores. What were some of the most common challenges that you heard from small businesses who are making that transition from in-person only to e-commerce? And what did you do to respond to some of those challenges?
Yeah, just hearing Leanne talk about those challenges or the trends that they're seeing made me really connect with one of the biggest challenges that we've seen, and it's that it's absolutely overwhelming to try to come up with a solution to move online. If you're primarily been a brick and mortar business, the idea of going online is just it doesn't even cross. It doesn't come to mind, and when it does, it's so overwhelming that you just put it off to the side. So that's the first thing that we saw, and really with COVID, there was no more putting it off. They just had to go online in order to continue to operate. So that was the first thing we hear. Then from there, they rushed to go online. So they just picked the fastest solution, the solution that allowed them to continue to reach their customers, and didn't really have a lot of time to sit back and evaluate on what made sense for them. So then they didn't really stop to consider, okay, well, what are all the additional pieces that I have to consider when I'm online? So if we think about restaurants, it's not just offering your food online. How do you accept an order? How do you receive that order? How do you time those orders? And then how do you communicate that back out to your customer or get those goods to your customer? And there's just so many pieces to consider that, business owners take so much time to first to set up their business for the brick and mortar side, and there was just no time to evaluate when COVID hit back in March, April. So that feeling of being overwhelmed and intimidated, that's our solution. And when we talk about our suite of tools and our e-commerce solution, we do everything in one-stop shop. So you can run your brick and mortar with Square. You can create customized checkout links if you're a salon and you want to just post something on your social media and have your customers purchase that one item in a really nice, seamless experience. So we found ways to allow these businesses to not just go online, but go online in this seamless, easy to use experience overall. But yeah, I think that feeling of being overwhelmed and not knowing what the right thing is and not having the time to truly evaluate was the thing we heard the loudest from our customers.
Leanne, would those be the kind of the similar things that you heard for those who were transitioning to e-commerce only?
Yeah, absolutely. Listening to Carissa, I want to build and not repeat, because such similarities. When we think of the challenges, it's that need to pivot overnight. And again, if you're a small business owner and your expertise is, maybe it's you have a bookstore, a jewelry store, there's a good chance your skill set is not in technology and understanding platforms and what's needed to pivot. So I think that's very overwhelming for a lot of the partners we talk to. And so similar to Carissa, leading your business through digital transformation in the middle of a pandemic is overwhelming. So it's about creating simplification and getting started, but just getting started. And trying to move past that overwhelm piece and keeping it simple. There's a need to keep your customers informed. At the beginning of the pandemic with store closures, there was a lot of feedback. Hey, you've changed your hours and I didn't know about that. So again, these seem like pretty simple things, but they were overlooked by a lot of businesses. And then the need to connect with your customers where they are, where they were is online. And then it was working with partners. If you can, it's investing and building online capabilities. And the conversations we had initially was, this could be as simple as setting up a Facebook or Instagram account so that you're immediately searchable online. And if you already have a well-established online footprint, think about introducing e-commerce capabilities, platforms like Shopify, working with Square. And then lastly, is thinking about opportunities to pivot your business and take advantage of the situation we're all in. And again, if we talked about silver linings, there have been many businesses that have stopped and paused and realized this is an opportunity to rethink how we set up our business and how people can discover our products online. So those are the conversations we've had.
I dropped off my technical issues. It wouldn't be a webinar in 2020 or 2021 if there wasn't an issue. But thank you, Leanne. I think I caught 98% of what you were saying. And I think it actually segues really well into a question I have for Hisham. I mean, both Chris and Leanne talked about, the idea of moving online was, so overwhelming for some, and the need to make it really simple and, having all these processes in place. It makes me wonder what the experience for Loblaws would have been like during 2020 and having this huge demand in essential items, groceries or medicine or clothes or what have you. What that would have been like if you had not laid that foundation, in the mid 2010s. In addition, did you have any issues or challenges with your supply chain? I mean, maybe some of them weren't ready to scale up to the certain to the degree that was needed, and how you overcame those over the course of the last 10, 11 months.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think what really resonated from what, Carissa and Leanne were saying, a lot of people tend to focus on just the platform, like what is my online presence? What does the store look like and everything? And they overlook a lot of the other stuff that's really important in the experience, which is like, how do I actually offer my services? How do I actually ship the goods out? How do I actually fill my forward logistics, right? And how I get that going. And so then, a lot of people spend most of their time just focusing on the first thing, and then they get caught flat-footed, right? When the sales come in demands, and then they're not delighting the customers, right? And so I think, piggybacking off what they were saying, it does seem very daunting, but I think there are some really great platforms out there, like whether it's Square or Shopify and even Facebook that can help you figure out how to reach and message your customers. But then you start from that point of view of, what's my customer value proposition? Who is my customer? What am I trying to offer them? And how do I do it in the best way? And then do I start thinking about, okay, if I'm a restaurant, how am I going to make that order and deliver it? If I'm a store and a small store, but how do I want to do it? And who is that my logistics partner that I'm going to use to ship the goods out and everything? And start thinking those so that when the orders come in, things are going to move seamlessly. and so I think that would be my advice. And when you get all that set up and you know what your products are, and you actually know how to manage your inventory and how to manage your sort of product listings, then you can start jumping on these platforms and you're going to be off to the races, right? And so I think that's part of the recipe that worked for Loblaw, is that we actually had a lot of investment, right? I think from a supply chain, just between our 2,400 stores, we really do have a supply chain that's second to none. So I don't think there was ever a risk, in terms of the supply and having the stock. What really became the challenge, though, is, okay, we got all the product in the stores, but now I need to get it from the store, to the customers, whether it's to their, the trunk in their car that's in the parking lot, or to their home. And so that became the challenge, and we had, like I said, a lot of the planning for it, but it was just an acceleration, right? But it was having that foresight of saying, okay, this is, how do we optimize that? And so it's about, okay, how do we hire, the colleagues that can help with the store picking? How do we make that picking most efficient as possible, right? So they're doing it in the fastest way, and so we can handle that demand. How do we scale up and do some of the fulfillment centers that we built? And we scaled up, really it was a matter of weeks, right? Where we built several fulfillment centers, and that was all part of that strategy. And I think that was the challenge that faced us, and we overcame. And I think that's, if we didn't have that in place, and I think it was just the planning, right, or approaching the problem from that way, then I think we would have disappointed a lot of Canadians. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We do have a few more minutes before we get to the Q&A from the audience. So I want to pose a couple of questions that are, for all three of you. Lots of new innovation happened during COVID-19, lots of new e-commerce trends. Some were already in the making and just were adopted at a very accelerated pace. Others were brand new. Which of those trends do you see staying beyond COVID-19, whenever that end may be? I don't know who wants to take that one first. Maybe Hisham, we'll start with you.
Well, I think honestly, there was a lot of stuff that Leanne said there that was, bang on the money in terms of, I think the biggest trend is we saw an acceleration of e-commerce adoption, right? I think there is, a lot of people who didn't necessarily shop certain categories, right, or certain sectors online that were maybe forced to do it, but now that they've tried it, they like it and they'll likely stay, right? And so I think, when hopefully this pandemic is behind us, it's not to say that all that shopping will stay, but there's going to be a good portion that will stay online. But now what becomes really apparent is that the bar has been raised, right? Those people that are now online, they're going to look at it and say, okay, I expect my experience to have, really great discovery. I still want a replacement for when I was browsing the mall and getting ideas and that window shopping. So where is that in my experience online? Where is my personalization? What's replacing that relationship I had with a store associate who knew what I wanted and knew my likes, and my desires? And so what we're going to see is this trend where the bar is going to be constantly raised. And so, us as businesses then have to keep meeting that and do it through things like personalization and offering great discovery. And I think the trend for me is, in the past, people might have gotten away with sort of mediocre, e-commerce experiences. That's not going to fly anymore. And I think that bar has just been, risen going forward.
Yeah, really well said. Leanne or Krista?
Sure, I can build on that. I mean, I think it's really straightforward. Now that we're in 2021, businesses have to invest in e-commerce. And with that, prioritize convenience alongside health and safety, as well as communicating brand values. So Hisham has said a lot of this. I think the mentality of, the short term and needing to provide essential, that is past us. This is here to stay. So it really is, setting up the entire businesses. So, large or small, it means that a digital approach isn't just an incremental opportunity. It now is imperative for survival. And the implications for businesses is that the shift will likely impact a few things. And it's sort of that bigger picture, long-term thinking. How will businesses not only retain the existing customers, but attract new audiences? How are they going to communicate with customers? Now that customers are coming into stores less, they'll need to find new ways to keep in touch. And lastly, how they provide service. Many businesses will need to reimagine their model to stay connected going forward in a sustainable way. So whether you're a florist, a fitness studio, a bakery, if you haven't already, it's about taking the time to rethink how people will discover your product and interact with your services. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but it really can be seen as a silver lining and an opportunity to reset and build. I don't mean to oversimplify that. Again, leading a business through digital transformation in a pandemic when these are new skills that people are acquiring is not easy. But I just would encourage everyone to, take advantage and leverage the free resources available, whether it's Digital Main Street, the Chamber of Commerce. There are many resources to help people along.
I think there's probably going to be a lot of overlapping here. But one thing to build on what Leanne was saying is also business owners shouldn't be afraid that they made a decision to go online or do something, create one solution really quickly, and then now they have to change again. That's okay. We were all reacting really quickly last year, and you had to do what you had to do in order to continue to operate. Now you can take a step back and evaluate and do something that works well for your business. I'm thinking about just trends in general. Prior to COVID, we used to speak a lot at Square about the importance of accepting all different forms of payment, which seems crazy now because when we were talking to cash only businesses, well, of course that probably doesn't exist anymore. What a different world we lived in. But now post COVID, it's just building on that, and that businesses, they're going to have to meet their buyers, however those buyers, their customers want to purchase things. So it's just, whether it's physically in a shop when we're allowed to do so, accepting online orders, visiting a business in some sort of interactive virtual way, engaging through social media, of course, email. There's just so many more and new and exciting ways that these businesses can operate, and that's just going to continue to grow and evolve.
Excellent. Well, turning over to audience questions, because we have quite a few that have been trickling in. And as a reminder for anyone who wants to submit a question through Slido, the code is IR4128. And there is a question here about whether this will be available to download for future reference. This is being recorded and will be posted to our to the Canadian Chamber's website, and everybody here will get a link to that. I guess the first question that we can start with is, for businesses that haven't historically invested heavily in e-commerce, what do you advise is the best approach to building an online offering? I guess, what would be step one? Maybe we'll start with Carissa, just because you're the big box on my screen.
Yeah, sure. Last to speak, first to go. Yeah. Kind of building on that overwhelming that overwhelming message, there's actually a lot of really amazing tools that people can utilize that are online. There's a lot of really awesome free tools that people can take advantage of online. Leanne already spoke about what Facebook and Instagram are doing. That's a really great way to start online. Square, we have a free online e-com solution that will have your payments fully integrated. So I think the first place to go, and this is probably not overly helpful, but Google and just do a quick search on what feels right, what suits your business, what meets your needs. If you don't have robust needs, then there's a lot of really simple tools that you can take advantage of for free to at least get you up and running.
And Hisham, I want to pose that question to you as well, because I think Leanne and Carissa have a really great perspective for some of the smaller businesses, but obviously your experience is from a more complex organization. If you are one of those medium-sized business and you are not yet online, or you have a very limited presence online, what would your advice be to those who are looking to expand their offering? What would the first step be?
Yeah, I think the first step, it's kind of what I said in the previous answer question, right? It's ignore the online piece for a second, right? And just think about, what is your customer value proposition, right? If you understand, okay, I always have this mantra, like it used to be that you always thought about getting Canadians whatever they wanted, right? And it was always about, okay, what's my product and what it's offering, right? But now if you expand that to say it's whatever they want, whenever they want, wherever they want, right? And if you take those other two dimensions, then you start thinking about, okay, what do I need to do? And so then you start saying, okay, imagine now that I need to fulfill whatever my service is or my good is at any time of the day, right? And at any location. And so what does that mean? And then you start thinking about your internal, say, supply chain, right? And like, again, if you're in the business of doing goods, okay, then how are you doing your forward logistics? Okay, so if I got an order, assume you're going to get an order, how would I actually stage that order? How would I package it? Who would I ship it with? What's my backup plan, right? How would I make sure it gets there in time? Because immediacy is very important. And so you start thinking about these things, like it's just your internal operations, right? How you do it. And kind of you get all those ducks in a row, then you'll understand, okay, when I open the doors, I actually know how to cater to that demand, right? And I can service it. And once you've kind of got that figured out, and then you also figure out who your customer is and how you want to message them, that also, really helps figure out, okay, you need to now, get those eyeballs to come to you, right? And see you online. So then you're also figuring out, okay, how do I message them and who should I message? Once you kind of figured all that stuff out, then you can go to the Google and you'll see there's so many great platforms, right? Whether it's the platforms like Square or the Shopify that can now, you got your basics, all fundamentals there. And so now you're able to adopt those platforms and accelerate. And so you can get your e-commerce offering online. You know how you can get your products up there. You know when orders flow in. You know how you're going to service them quickly, and you're going to have quick turnaround. And then you've also figured out your customers and how you want to message them. So then you can use great platforms, like Facebook and everything, where you can actually figure out, okay, now I know how to reach my customers and how I can message them, and those are partners that could help me get there. But if you kind of just dive in, straight and start refocusing on, okay, I just need to get online, need to get a store, I think that's where a lot of people trip up, right? And versus kind of getting those basics right and figuring those things.
Very, very interesting. And I think the next question is related to all three of you. And I think we talked about this a little bit in terms of, people have come to expect that quick, the ease and the efficiency and being able to have things convenient and arrive very quickly. We have a question about how can we get Canadians to buy from local companies directly instead of some of the larger international e-commerce giants? I don't know who wants to take that one first, Leanne.
Sure, I'm happy to start. I mean, there's many ways. If I think around the work that Digital Main Street has done, Canada United, and again, I just want to read it from the last question, so many free resources from organizations like this to be leveraged. But a lot of it is working with local and creating a good experience. I think there's two things that we've seen. One is just the outpouring of support for our own communities in the pandemic. We all want to see our local restaurants and favorite shops, thrive and get through this really challenging time. So there's been support, but also I think it's been the local businesses also responding and creating a good experience, whether it's, Wednesday night takeout and getting that personal note with your dinner and some free donuts. That might seem like a simple example, but it matters to people and it creates a good experience. I think that's really important to continue that. You get a quality experience and an experience you remember, you will continue to invest locally.
Perfect. I couldn't agree more. Sorry, Chris, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I'm going to put one plug in here as well. Something that was really exciting and well, one, Square, we're so passionate about local business, small business. That's truly the heartbeat of our communities. And so we created Give and Get Local. It's a platform for you to go on. You can search your neighborhood and find any Square businesses that are selling gift cards. And we did a lot of that just internally, giving gift cards at Christmas time to Square sellers, which are just these amazing, creative, artistic, local businesses. So I think that there's a lot of different companies out there that are finding ways to connect their small businesses, their local businesses to the general population. So before, hopefully all of these larger companies can get on board with that type of strategy, and then it will continue to connect the communities back together and ensure that we're thinking about our local business, the coffee shop down the street who's trying to pivot and get creative, that we can go buy something from them versus Amazon.
Our next question is related to the last one. What will be the impact of COVID and the switch to e-commerce on the ability of businesses and their willingness to sell to new markets? So, beyond their local base or beyond their traditional customer base. I mean, if you can expand to, if you're a business in Manitoba, how do you sell to a business in Nova Scotia? What impact have you seen on that, and how do you see that moving forward? Krista or Leanne or Hisham?
Sure, I can take a stab at it. I mean, I think I think the economy and globalization, we're moving in this direction, just like we were heading towards e-commerce. I never thought I'd see my parents buy their groceries online, but it happened. So this is happening anyway. And if you think of 5G in the mix, which is a great equalizer if executed well, it's just going to level the playing fields. And I think if we look at it another way, you know, heading back to a working environment, we have proven that we can do business globally and connect with other markets in a virtual way. So I think we're going to continue to see an acceleration of globalization and a global economy that can thrive, because in the last 12 months, 10 months, we've shown we can do it.
Absolutely.
We've also seen a lot of businesses, and I think in the hardest times is when we see true innovation and true creativity. And we've seen, you know, businesses in New Brunswick start selling their goods across Canada. And part of that was having access to these awesome tools that they now have access to, and also pivoting and selling products that they never imagined they would. So we saw a lot of breweries and distilleries start doing hand sanitizer because they had the ability to, and that was something that we needed. And then because of that success and because of that innovation and their ability to pivot quickly, they were able to expand across Canada. So I think we'll continue to see that, just because people are pivoting, changing, evolving their business, and realizing that they have a larger reach than they originally had in their original business model.
The next question is, how will the e-commerce landscape change or affect rural areas where high-speed internet is not readily available or is unreliable? I don't know if any of you have had, Hisham, I don't know, do you have any kind of challenges in more rural areas, or has it been, you know, similar within an urban area or a rural area, or I don't know if you could speak to that.
Yeah, we would definitely see challenges with rural areas. I think, you know, just to address kind of the comment about just even the high-speed internet and everything. I mean, my personal hope is as 5G, you know, rolls out, you know, that will be the equalizer, right? And it will kind of level the playing field and give that high-speed access to everybody. And so, you know, unfortunately, it's a couple of years out, but I think it's an inevitability, and it's going to happen, right? And at that point, sort of the access, you know, to the goods and everything, or to be able to see them and purchase should get leveled out. I think what will still be the challenge, and I think this is what we see, you know, today in Loblaws, though, is if I may do the transaction online, but then how do I actually get it delivered to me, right? And sometimes it's not actually delivered. I don't have delivery in a rural area, right? And so it still is, you know, a half an hour to maybe several hour drive to go to a local post office to pick it up, or I have to go to, you know, a grocery store and do my pickup there, right? And I think that will be an interesting challenge. You know, I don't have the answers for, but I think that is one to overcome, right? Is how do you actually get, you know, now that there's no longer the store that, you know, going to, right? What becomes sort of the pickup point, right? And that might actually open up new opportunities, right? And maybe that's where existing businesses can become a pickup point for other sellers and vendors, right? And you've seen some of this happen globally, right? Whether it's in Europe and some Latin America, right? Where some of these smaller businesses act as pickup points for third-party marketplace sellers, and what that did is drove a lot of foot traffic to their stores as well. And so that might be an interesting outcome that comes out of it, right? Which doesn't solve the problem that you still have to, you know, drive a ways to go get your goods, but then it becomes a one-stop shop, and you have access to a bunch of things.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point in terms of how, you know, e-commerce can be innovating and changing the way that we shop and we do business just generally. In terms of, you know, both, a couple of you have now mentioned 5G and the rollout and how that's going to impact, you know, e-commerce and beyond. There's something that I think a lot of small businesses have as an afterthought, and that's cybersecurity. And I know that I believe it was Chris or Leanne that one of you mentioned that in your opening comments, that people are willing to pay more for a product or a good if they know that their information, their data is kept more secure. Is there any, I mean, if you had one piece of advice for small businesses about cybersecurity, I mean, what would that be, especially for those that think, oh, well, I've got, you know, my antivirus on my computer, I'm good? I don't know who wants to go first. Hisham?
I'll maybe just chime in here is from a technical person point of view is don't do your stuff homegrown, right? I mean, there's a lot of great platforms that do it for you, right? So you know, there's a lot of great platforms that will handle that for you, right? You know, capturing your payments online, capturing the order data, and they are very secure and everything. And so I would say, you know, as a small business, leverage all that stuff, right? And try to minimize the amount of customer data and everything that's retained in any of your four walls. You know, I think would just be really good hygiene, right? Because there's a lot of people that, you know, are spending a lot of time and a lot of money how to figure out how to do that and do that really well. And I don't think, you know, any small business will be able to compete at that scale. So why not stand on the shoulders of giants there? And so that would be kind of my advice is we're in lucky times where there's so many tools that are available, and whether they're free or at a very low cost, right? But with very high value. And I think we should, you know, leverage them as much as possible.
I would just build on that. There's so much credibility in going with something that is proven and trusted. And if you didn't, I think you risk, you know, impeding your own brand, because safety, trust, privacy all become core to the brand that you have in an online environment. So all the more reason to make sure that you're working with trusted partners.
Perfect. I think the last question that we have before we have to close off the event is, one of the biggest challenges for a small business is online marketing spend and an online marketing strategy. What and how would you advise a small business to approach it? Anyone take that one? Yeah.
Again, I think I would rely on a lot of the resources that are currently available, because it's not just about setting up your business and creating an online environment with payments. It also gets into then marketing strategies and, you know, your brand values and how are you differentiating yourself. And I think that's really important, because this is what's taking us from the last 10 months, I keep wanting to say 10 months, which has been about survival and essential, to long-term strategic online presence that could potentially go across borders. But there are tons of resources to accommodate, you know, small budgets as well from a marketing perspective. And I would just encourage people to leverage and take advantage of all that's available to you.
Yeah, just there's so many tools that are available now where things like SEO are completely included in the platform that you choose to use. So one, do your research, know exactly what you're trying to build, who you're trying to reach, who are your customers, and then find a partner who's going to help you reach those goals and those outcomes. And if it is accredited, a true platform, not something you're building in the backyard, most likely these tools are going to be available to you on that platform as well.
Perfect. Well, with that, we are running low on time. We've obviously covered a lot today, and there's been a lot of interest in the questions. And I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but we will share, you know, more resources that you can take advantage of. Hisham, Leanne, and Krista, I want to thank all three of you for joining us here today. It was a really important conversation, you know, as we head into 2021 and hopefully start to see the light at the end of the pandemic tunnel sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, I think some of the things we've talked about here are going to be really critical for businesses of all sizes. For folks on the line, the next event in our fourth industrial revolution series will be taking place on March 2nd, and we'll be discussing agriculture in the 21st century. On behalf of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, a big thank you to everyone who joined us here today. With that, we're going to close out. Take care.